it's Brigitte again with Hawbecker and Garver, and now I will be discussing paragraphs 34 and 35 of the contract of the 8.0. So paragraph 34 is alternative energy, and paragraph 35 is possession after closing. So let's start with alternative energy. So we are going to check whether there are solar panels or any other type of alternative energy present at the property. And then we're going to go through and check whatever's applicable, right? So are they owned outright? If so, then we're going to check that first box. Are they owned but subject to a financing agreement? Then we're also going to include the remaining payments and whether they will be paid in full by seller at closing or assumed by buyer. The last option that we have is if those solar panels are rented. If they are, we're going to check that box and then provide the monthly payment amount. So the seller needs to provide all of the documentation to buyer not later than 3 business days after acceptance. Right? So they're going to provide copies of all documents related to solar panels, including electricity supply agreements. The buyer may approve those documents within 3 business days. So they have 3 business days to approve. And if they don't disapprove, then they will proceed. So another out that the buyers have is if those docs are inconsistent with representations in the paragraph. So if, for example, the seller checked the box that they are owned, that the solar panels are owned by the seller and they're actually rented, then the buyer can cancel. Or if the solar panel agreements cannot be canceled or signed as of the closing, the buyer also has the option to cancel. So the key point here is that if you're a buyer, you want all of this information as soon as possible, right? And same thing if you're a seller. So if you're a seller, you want to get all this documentation out there so that if the buyer does decide to cancel, you know sooner rather than later, and everyone can move on. So next we have the possession after closing, which is one of our favorites at HG. So possession after closing, right? We do not recommend doing this. We understand that in some situations it's just unavoidable, but if there's anything you can do to not enter a close possession agreement, then by all means do it. We try to protect you to the best of our ability, but we cannot do anything to fully protect either the buyer or the seller, or both. So a couple of risks. One is that the seller doesn't leave, and as a buyer, you would have to evict them, which can be timely and costly. Another risk is that something can happen to the property, right? So if a mover bangs a wall or bangs into a light fixture and, breaks it, then what, right? So then we have to figure out what we're going to do. So the seller remains in the property after the closing date, right? That's the gist of a possession after closing. So the seller remains responsible for utilities, contents and liability insurance, and home maintenance expenses. There is essentially a security deposit, right, is what is held in escrow from the seller's proceeds to ensure that possession transfers on the stated date, that the property is in the same condition, wear and tear accepted, and to pay for use and occupancy, if any. On that next line, we have the sum of the per diem, right? So generally we use the buyer's PITI, right? Principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, and do 1/30 of that to get the per diem amount. Now, if it's a cash buyer, obviously you need to calculate it a little bit differently, but that's generally how we go about it. And then one item I forgot to discuss is on line 533 for that escrow or that security deposit. If that line is left blank, it defaults to 2% of the purchase price. So generally speaking, we see between 1 and 2% of the purchase price is standard in the real estate world. So then we have a penalty if the sellers are not out by the possession date, and that is typically 3 times the daily amount. So if your per diem is $100, $300 once you're past that date. And then the last thing I want to point out in the contract is that it specifically states that nothing creates a landlord-tenant relationship, right? But that's essentially what it is. Not confusing at all. So best practice in this area would be to draft a post-close possession agreement, get all the terms worked out, because oftentimes this paragraph of the contract isn't filled out completely, or there are additional terms that the attorneys want to set forth. Get the agreement from everyone prior to closing, have it signed so that closing is easy breezy. So that's all I have for you. Yeah, you guys take care. Thank you for watching, and I will see you around.